time for your health. The African American Wellness Watch. Trusted information for us, by us. Dr. Mike Lenore and other experts from around the country and around the world have the latest on how you and your family can get healthy and stay well. It's time for the African American Wellness Watch.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mignon Lenore Hall, and on behalf of the African American Wellness Project, I would like to welcome Nicole Enix to the show tonight. Tonight, Nicole is going to be talking about adolescence to adulthood, my diabetic life, growing up and living with type 1 diabetes. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mignon. I'm happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. So I would like to start off tonight's conversation wondering if you can give us a definition of what diabetes is, especially type 1 diabetes.
Type 1 diabetes is a lifelong disease where your pancreas either produces little or no insulin, which leads to high blood sugar. There's also type 2 diabetes, which you don't get until you're older, but type 1 mostly is in your adolescence or youth.
Thank you for that wonderful definition. I want to ask you next, how old were you when you got diagnosed with diabetes?
I was 9 years old.
You were not. What was that like for you when you got the moment that, oh, your parents take you to the doctor because you're not feeling well, and then they finally have a diagnosis for you? What did that feel like to you to hear that?
It was pretty traumatic. I will never forget it. We were in New York. We had visited some friends that lived in New York, and we went to go see a Debbie Allen musical. I don't remember the name of the musical, but what I do remember is that I had to use the bathroom really bad. And my mom wouldn't let me get up in the middle of the show. And so I went anyway. And that was very unusual for me at 9 years old. So my parents became concerned, in addition to the fact that I had lost some weight recently in the last couple of months. So they took me to the doctor, and the doctor said that I had diabetes, and I had never heard of that word before. I didn't know what it meant or how much of an impact it would have on my life. But what I do remember is that he said I'd have to take shots for the rest of my life. And at that moment I cried because I had had shots before and they hurt. So I was scared to death. He said that I couldn't eat sugar anymore. And so I was pretty upset about that because I was a huge candy lover. He said that it would be for the rest of my life. So there was no cure. So I was pretty shaken up. And also it was during Thanksgiving. So I was hospitalized during Thanksgiving, and I wasn't able to eat Thanksgiving with my family. And because I was diagnosed with diabetes, they wouldn't let them bring me any food. So I was pretty upset about that. So it was a lot of new things being thrown at me, and I was pretty upset. But
so this was all at the tender age of 9.
Yeah.
So right around the time where you're reaching adolescence, you're probably still in grade school, on your way to middle school. So I can imagine that must have been very daunting and challenging for you at that age. What would you say going into maybe your later years, like 11 and 12, when you're at adolescence, going into your teenage years, what would you say about your disease affected you the most when you're entering into the middle school teenage years? How that impacted you?
I would say that I felt very different than the other kids. I couldn't eat what they could eat. I couldn't eat sugar. I had to take insulin shots every time I ate something. So that was at the time that was embarrassing to me to have to take shots, especially in front of other people. Um, in terms of exercising, anytime I would exercise, my blood sugars would often go low. So I had to carry juice with me everywhere I went if we were going to be doing any physical activity. And often during physical activity, I'd have to stop and drink juice. So I think just mainly just feeling very different, very isolated. I didn't know any other type 1 diabetics. This was before the days of internet or Facebook. And so I felt very alone.
So you felt pretty isolated. I can
Yeah.
imagine you feeling isolated. So when your friends would ask you, "Oh, Nicole, what's wrong? Oh, Nicole, why don't you feel well?" How would you explain this to your classmates when you were so young?
I would tell them if they asked, I would tell them that I was diabetic. I mean, but kids a lot of times don't understand what that is, or they make fun of it, or think it's something to tease about, which hurt. But I had no problem explaining it, and I had to explain how to treat it, because if I had a low blood sugar when I was spending the night over a friend's house or out at an event with a friend, they had to know what to do. So I always made it a point to tell them that I needed orange juice or something with sugar for low blood sugars.
So, what would you say you did to help stay positive during this tough time? I mean, you're an adolescent, you're in high school, people are going out, people are kind of getting into a little party, maybe a little bit of dating at that time. How did you stay positive throughout this ordeal? If you said you had to give yourself shots, you weren't feeling well, you had to make sure you had juice, you're trying to explain all this, you feel isolated. What were some of your coping mechanisms during this time?
I think one of my coping mechanisms was denial. Acting like I didn't have diabetes. So if I was out with friends and they were eating milkshakes, I'd eat a milkshake too, because I didn't want to appear, different than they were. If I was dating somebody back then, I would never tell them, not at the beginning of dating, that I was diabetic or that I had to take shots or, any kind of special instructions about if I got sick, because again, I felt that was very embarrassing. So mainly denial. And I would say that mechanism of denial probably lasted till my 30s.
Wow, that's a really, really long time. Um, wow. So growing up with this disease, feeling isolated once again, going through this from the age of 9 till up until 32, you really felt comfortable or accepted the fact that, this is what I'm living with. This is my challenge. How do you think diabetes has impacted your health? And what do you think you could have done differently from the age of 9 until now? If there's anything, if you were talking to your younger self and you said,
Mhm.
okay, Nicole, at 30, now that I've accepted the fact that I am a type 1 diabetic, what would you go back and tell your younger self?
Um, I think I would tell my younger self that my health comes first, and that anything that I have to do to preserve my health, including not eating sugar or testing my blood sugars. That was the other thing that I had to constantly do, was test my blood sugars. That those things were critical in preventing future side effects of diabetes. And because I did not heed my doctor's advice in my earlier years, as a result, I have a lot of side effects. So it's not a joke. It's something to be taken very seriously. I have kidney disease, and I have eye disease as a result of diabetes. And so those two conditions could have been avoided or lessened had I listened to my doctors and tested my blood sugar more often, or ate less sugar that would require more insulin, etc.
So you're saying if you could do it all over again, you're saying just listen to your doctor. I mean, but growing up, I mean, not eating sugar, you know, every kid wants sugar. Every kid doesn't want to stop what they're doing to check their blood sugar. So thinking back, what tools would you like to see in place for kids to get better support when they grow up with that, so they can grow up living a healthier life without any of the ramifications of the disease when they don't take good care of themselves?
Well, luckily, how I grew up with diabetes and how kids today grew up with diabetes is very different. So, when I grew up with diabetes, I had to take shots for every meal. I had to take a shot of long-acting insulin, actually a couple of shots with long-acting insulin, and then shots for shorter acting insulin. Nowadays, they don't do that anymore. In most cases, most kids are on insulin pumps. I'm on an insulin pump. So it's continuous insulin fed into you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You have a continuous glucose monitor that's attached to you, which is also connected to the pump. So it's basically like a pancreas, but on the outside of your body. So it's a lot easier to take care of diabetes now as a young person than it was when I was growing up, and a lot less conspicuous. I mean, I carry my pump inside my bra. Most people who see me don't have any idea that I'm diabetic. So I would say that that it's probably significantly easier, but that doesn't make eating well or you don't have to test your blood sugar anymore, but you have to look at your monitor to make sure that your blood sugar isn't going high. Exercise is very important because that helps to manage the disease, but at the same time, you have to be careful that you don't exercise too much because your blood sugar can go low. So it is a lot to handle, whether you grew up like I did with shots and blood sugar. I started with urine testing, and then they came out with self blood testers that you could use at home. And then, probably when I was about 35, that's when I got my first insulin pump. Again, the advice is basically the same, but I would just say that it's a lot easier to do it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes total sense. As we go through time, things change, better treatment, easier to carry your pump, etc. So I want to go back on what you said. You talked a little bit about diet and exercise, and having a good diet and maybe exercising is something that helps your diabetes, but at the same time, you can't exercise too much because if you do, your blood. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because that seems like kind of a vicious cycle when it comes to diet and exercise. So you can elaborate a little bit on that for me, please?
Yeah. So, I'll just speak for myself. I, and this as a friend, I've never liked exercising. And one of the main reasons I don't like exercising is because exercise has led to drastic drops in my blood sugar. I remember one time when I was living in Virginia, I had agreed to go hiking with some coworkers. And I think the name of this trail was like Billy Goat's Gruff or something. But it was the most heinous hike I've ever been on. I mean, we were climbing up, it was basically rock climbing. So we were climbing up rocks and mountains and all kind of stuff. My blood sugar dropped. I had some juice with me because I had prepared, but the juice wasn't enough because that level of physical activity, and anytime I stopped and drank the juice, and then maybe my blood sugar would come up again. When I started hiking again, then my blood sugar would drop. So there was a midpoint of this hike, and I'll never forget this. And the choices were that they were either going to call a helicopter to come get me, or there was a trail that kind of cut through the hike to get out to the place where we had started, I didn't really want to do either, because hiking more, again, was dangerous. And I didn't want to have to be, you go up in a helicopter, but, so needless to say, I have never been on a hike since then, because I just don't want to be bothered. And that's not something that someone who doesn't have diabetes can understand or has to deal with. You do
So
a
hiking
really,
might not be hiking, running, maybe something a little bit more rigorous, or anaerobic might not be the right exercise for someone who's diabetic. What potentially could be the right exercise for someone who's diabetic?
I mean, the exercises that I have tried are walking, taking classes. I mean, anything where if I have to stop or I have to get out of there and get some juice, it's not a problem. Obviously, at a hike where we were like 3 miles in the hike, I mean, there's nowhere you can go. So again, that's not the best exercise, but there are exercises that you can do as a diabetic. So I'm not saying that not to. I'm not saying not to exercise. I'm just saying that you have to prepare to exercise, and you have to be careful that you don't do the wrong exercise, because it can put you in a precarious situation.
Okay. So with that being said, going back to your younger years, I don't remember you participating in a lot of sports. Could have potentially been not your thing, but was it something that you kind of tended to avoid because of your diabetes?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't like to do sports, because again, if I was, playing baseball and running, around the bases and my blood sugar dropped, I'd have to, tell the coach that I couldn't play anymore, or that I'd have to drink juice until I could play anymore. So, I didn't want to be in that situation where I had to let my team members down, or I have to tell the coach that I wasn't able to do something. So I shied away from sports. I did dance a lot. So in my teen years, I focused on dancing, and my teachers, understood that I was a diabetic, and they had juice, and it was not a problem. So, I found something that, and plus, there weren't any sports that I particularly loved anyway. So I loved to dance, and so that's what I did.
So I'm a parent, and there's a lot of parents out there whose kids will be diagnosed with diabetes. What might be something, if you could go back and tell your parents, or we'll start with your parents, and then I want to start with your friends, about what support you could have used that you didn't get when you were younger, can you elaborate on that a little bit? Parents, friends, maybe even teachers, maybe just supports you wish that were in place in all those entities that would have been helpful.
I think the biggest thing for me was having support from other diabetics. So I was the only person in my entire family that had diabetes. We had no history of type 1 diabetes. No one in my family at that time had type 2 diabetes, because again, I was younger. So I would say to parents now that it's important that your child connects with other type 1s, so that they will not feel so isolated, so that they will not feel so alone. You as their parents can definitely support them, but you can't fully understand like another child who is going through the same thing. So now there's all kinds of Facebook groups. I'm in several Facebook groups for people who use the type of pump that I use, et cetera. And I imagine that there are groups for teenagers and et cetera, that they can communicate with each other and rely on each other, give each other advice, et cetera. I mean, one thing for me as a young person was, how am I going to travel with all this stuff with blood tester with with insulin and syringes and stuff, especially like at events like prom where you have a small purse and maybe not a lot of room to carry stuff in. So again, it's just being aware of things like that and preparing for things like that.
And do you think the schools should do a better job of informing other kids about, okay, some of your classmates might have diabetes. This is what it could look like. How could you better support them? I don't think I remember back in high school, I don't remember having any of that type of conversations at school or even in middle school. So do you think that would be helpful if schools probably integrated some of that into, I don't know, homeroom class or health ed?
I think it might be helpful just for other kids to understand, what the disease is, especially how to treat it, so that if they're ever with another diabetic child, they'll know what to do. That it's not something to be teased about. Kids can be cruel, so I think just teaching kids about the disease and that it's a serious disease, and that they should take it seriously and not tease would be useful. So.
Wow. Well, you've certainly have given us a lot of information in a short amount of time. So I want to ask you one more question. If you wanted people to know one thing about living with diabetes, what would that one thing be?
It's hard. It's really, really hard. There is not a day that goes by that I do not wish that I did not have this disease. This disease has taken my eyesight from me. It has taken my kidneys from me, and one day it may take my life from me. So, but despite that, I carry on. I try to take as good a care of myself as I can. When you know better, you do better. So just know that it is a very difficult disease to have. It's not a simple disease to manage, so if you know a diabetic, and they're having trouble with their blood sugars, or their A1C is higher than than your doctor might like, or your parents might like. Don't just say, well, we'll just control your blood sugar better, or just don't eat sugar. A lot more goes into it than that, and so just recognize the complexity of the disease, that it is a very tough disease to manage, and be sympathetic.
Wow, Nicole, this was a really great interview. I hope we reach as many young people as we can to hear your fascinating story, living with diabetes, what they should do differently. And I really want to thank you for your time and sharing, because I know it's probably hard to open up. I can sense a little emotion when you talked about some parts of this. And, being me not knowing much about it, I learned so much. I've known you for all this time, and I had to process from my own, being your friend at a young age. I had no idea about the isolation and the supports that you needed. So I just hope that if we could reach as many adolescents and teens as we can to hear this, I think the better outcomes we'll have with this.
I hope so too. I hope that the kids that hear this know that there is hope, and that they're working on ways to cure it every day. I've had this disease for over 40 years. I have been waiting for a cure, but hopefully you won't have to wait as long as I've waited. So hopefully it will be in the near future, and there's all kinds of things that they're working on now that are positive and indicate that a cure may be soon. So.
Well, Nicole, once again, I appreciate you sharing, and I think we need to have a part 2 to be determined at a later date.
I'd be happy to talk with you about it more.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicole.
You're welcome.